Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this Thursday morning webinar series. I'm Chloe Tetro, not Andrew, as you can tell. But for this morning, we're going to be looking at not falling for the Christmas hype, basically around food more so than anything else. So we'll take a quick look about food marketing, especially during the holiday season, using an awful lot of subtle but very, very powerful psychological tactics to influence your food choices. Most of the time, and actually oftentimes without fully realizing it and totally giving your consent, as it were. So we're going to have a look at how these tactics derail health efforts, and particularly if you're managing things like diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cholesterol, and weight. So it's basically to give you the tools to understand the strategies and help to give you that more kind of empowered look at the decisions that you get to choose over the holiday season. There's a great saying I wanted to open with, actually, and I can't for the life of me remember who said it, but basically it's easier to trick somebody than for them to realize, or for them to admit that they were tricked. So it's easier to trick somebody than for somebody admit that they were tricked. And that's an awful lot of the campaigning that happens around Christmas food type of marketing. So I was going to put it at the side, but actually the slide is fairly small. So priming and psychological priming is what I'm going to talk about firstly, and really take a look at what is involved in the psychology and how can you get some of your decision-making power back. So a key strategy that marketers use is called priming. So it's a psychological process where repeated exposure to certain cues influence your behavior without conscious awareness. So for example, seeing an advertisement for rich holiday foods or treats since the start of November, let's be honest, starts to prime your mind to crave them. So if you remember, there was a big thing about advertisers using props in particular movies, series, where somebody would all of a sudden open a can of Coke or open something, and people at home would go, oh yeah, I kind of fancy one of those. They know exactly what they're doing. So this basically triggers the initial desire for particular products. So it primes your subconscious decision making and steers you towards indulgences that you may not particularly want. So we're very, very visual creatures, monkey see, monkey do, all that kind of thing. So when we constantly are bombarded by whatever type of messaging, and this can be, political messaging, advertising, whatever it is, there's a tendency to take on board things that are repeated more often because, of course, as we know, that's how the brain works. So great example of this, an example I think is good of this is if you've ever heard a pop song, and the first time that you hear it, you go, God almighty, that is terrible. It's barely cohesive. It doesn't make any sense I don't understand the hype. And then the radio stations keep playing it and playing it and playing it. And you find yourself by the 10th time going, no, along with it. So the other aspect of it then is emotions in advertising. So this was, of course, post-Freud, Freud's nephew, Bernays, came up with the old advertising through emotions, and it has absolutely taken off majorly. We're constantly emotionally manipulated because emotions they bypass our prefrontal cortex thinking abilities, and they go straight to the core of us. So advertisers are absolute experts, emotional manipulators, and during the holidays they ramp it up to drive the sales. So they appeal to feelings of nostalgia is a huge one. This kind of what's your man's name? The Christmas Carol fella, it's gone totally out of my head. That kind of white Christmas, everybody gathered around the full turkey at the kitchen table, ha ha ha, ho ho ho, all this kind of things. It will really, really leverage our feelings of this white Christmas that was in our childhood, that was probably mostly absorbed through films and books more so than anything else. So this huge feeling of nostalgia, of belonging, of joy. Holiday ads typically will show like families coming together, the warmth of shared meals, and the happiness that the food is bringing. Because of course, gathering, of course, family aspects, warmth, shared experiences, they all definitely make us feel good. But of course, in the ad, they're all centered around a particular food. They're all centered around whatever product that they're looking to sell you, basically. So the message is very, very clear from them. It's indulging in certain foods equals love, tradition, happiness. Love, tradition, and happiness somehow don't exist divorced from this particular food. The food is the anchor. So that emotional tie is really, really powerful because, of course, we all want to feel connected and part of something special during the holidays, or ever, to be honest. So the research in consumer psychology will show that emotional advertising, as I was saying, totally bypasses critical thinking and will activate the limbic system in the brain. So that's your memory and emotions. When you're emotionally engaged, your decision making becomes way more impulsive. And of course, if you want to get a buyer making an impulse buy, let's get them into that lovely impulsive state. And rational thinking then goes out the window altogether. So that's why those holiday ads are filled with super indulgent food. They seem to carry so much weight. They speak directly to your emotions, not logic. That is how they have been designed. Remember, this is totally a design. It's in the design of it. This is not accidental. So the marketing tactics are often this kind of treat yourself mentality. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with treating yourself. And those of you that follow our talks will know we're absolutely not of that mind frame that you have to bypass all pleasures of food forever and ever or anything like that. But 4 weeks or a month is an awful long time to adopt that on a daily basis. And of course, you are getting primed to adopt that on a daily basis. It's a very, very powerful message that invites you to totally disregard what you have as your long-term health goals in favor of instant gratification. Phrases like, go on, you deserve the little treat, or treat yourself this holiday season. They'll tap directly into your reward system, and that seeks immediate pleasure and avoids delayed consequences. I'll worry about that in January. And it could be, the 5th of December. It's like, that's a long time to, put that on the long finger, but okay. The short-term thinking will often override long-term health goals, of course, especially when the food is packaged as a form of self-care or a way to foster connections. This is what drives me batty, is they are packaged as, but you've worked so hard, It's like, well, you may have worked really, really hard, but you also deserve to feel good in January as well and not go into the spiral of beating yourself up. So the power of rewarding yourself, especially with sugary treats, especially with foods that, like, we know, if we've our adult hat on, we know are not good for us. There's no bypassing that. It activates our dopamine system, which is responsible for pleasure and reinforcement, but also addiction. So that creates a loop where we crave that immediate satisfaction, feel good in the moment, even if it sabotages our long-term health goals. So the impacts, I'm sure you can probably guess some of the impacts. So how marketing will derail our health efforts. The holiday season is super, super heavily focused on food-based advertisements and can totally get in the way of how you've built the rest of your year, if you've got specific conditions, things like diabetes, polycystic ovarian syndrome, or just looking to really manage your weight. When we give in to emotional eating, especially around this time, it directly affects our blood sugar levels. And of course, this will increase our insulin resistance and exacerbate issues like those mentioned, things like non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, cholesterol imbalances, blood pressure, all of these types of things. Studies consistently show that increased consumption of refined sugars and processed carbs, which are totally the star of the show during these ads, have a direct link to insulin resistance, of course. And a major factor in type 2 is that insulin resistance and metabolic syndrome. So there's research 2008, 2014, Shulman, Ogden, all of these lads, but loads out there that the holiday weight gain, often fueled by these kind of marketing messages, can be significant of up to half a stone. And that's in 4 to 6 weeks. Much of that then being visceral fat, the most harmful type of fat linked to insulin resistance and cardiovascular disease. The psychological impact then, we've all been there, or we know somebody in our lives that has been there. So in addition to the physiological aspects, the marketing tactics undermine your motivation. The emotional guilt that often follows indulgences create a psychological barrier to returning to your health goals. So you feel bad, you don't want to go back to it because you feel like a failure, you feel like, oh, sure, there it is again, more evidence that I'm just not able for a diet. I'm not able for a health plan. I'm not able to look after myself, and I don't know why I bother. We've all been there or said those words or heard somebody close to us say those words. People with low carb or weight loss goals often find themselves trapped in this cycle. So they'll indulge due to external pressures, and I mean this with peer pressure as well. Irish households are an absolute, I mean, it's our cliche, isn't it? Go on, you will. Then there's feeling guilty afterwards, and then there's feeling totally demotivated. Here I am again, back to square one. All of these kind of messages that we tell ourselves, which are of course totally wrong. You never set yourself back to square one by having one or two things off plan, by having something here and there. There's this type of what the hell effect, which is my censored version of the F it switch that most people will say that they press in their heads, where a single lapse will lead to way more. So they'll go, Asher, look, I've messed it now. I might as well keep going. And you'd be surprised how many people, or I suppose maybe you wouldn't be surprised how many people, and I feel like we've all been there at certain points in different scenarios, will hit that switch and find themselves going totally overboard, and even further into guilt, further into that kind of downward spiral, and finding it really difficult to get back on track. So the guilt after eating unhealthy foods, which I'm not a fan of. Don't worry about guilt because it does not serve, and I'll explain why. There's a research done in 2008 by Valls et al. Shows that guilt around food often leads to further overeating as a form of self-soothing, because of course we feel bad. What makes us feel better? Endorphins and serotonin. Where do we find endorphins and serotonin? I mean, exercise, but that's the last thing most people want to do when they feel bad. The quickest thing is a food that contains sugar and fat together. So that cycle has a long-term impact on weight management, insulin control, but also how you feel about yourself, who you think you are. If you feel that you're somebody who just absolutely can't do food plans or look after themselves, your brain is going to conspire to make you correct. So let's have a quick look at marketing strategies and tactics. Remember, easier to trick somebody than for somebody to admit that they've been tricked. So behavioral economics, loss aversion. I'm only throwing these at you so that you can start to spot them out in the wild. Marketers are experts at exploiting the psychological principle of what is called loss aversion. I call this the slot machine effect. The idea that people are more motivated to avoid losses than they are to achieve gains. Now, what does that look like? So during Christmas or the holidays, this plays out in things like limited time offer, don't miss out. This madness must end soon, if any of you remember Bull Island. These advertisements make us feel as though we will definitely lose out on something super special if we don't get it right now, even though we might not have any initial desire for the product. So the fear of missing out, or FOMO, leads to irrational decisions and overconsumption. So the power of limited time offer. There's huge, amazing research done by Kahneman and Tversky. Kahneman of the Think Fast, Think Slow, Think Slow, Think Fast. That brilliant book shows how the fear of losing out is much more powerful than the potential benefits of gaining something. And that is absolutely why we think, oh, jeepers, this one's coming for free. We might as well buy, if there's 2 for 1, we'll get 4, that type of mentality. So hyper reality is another super interesting aspect that comes into it. So advertisers create what's known as a sense of hyper reality, making food seem like a rare experience that's tied to tradition or holiday. This is that kind of, who is your man, lads? If you can remember the name of your man, the Christmas Carol fella, it's just gone totally out of my head. If you remember it, just pop it into the comment section, because I feel like it's on the tip of my brain. So that type of nostalgia that we've mostly picked up from movies, from books, that kind of blanket white Christmas. We all went out and guffawed in the snow with hot cocoa and a snow sleigh and all this type of stuff. And the dog joined us, this kind of, Hallmark family moments. They don't just sell you food. They're trying to sell you this emotionally enriched experience, the joy of family togetherness, the nostalgia of past holidays. This makes us more likely to associate indulgent foods with special occasion. This means a lot to me. This means so much to me. Triggering that kind of emotional response that pushes us into making impulsive decisions. Now, of course, this is all by design. So how do we kind of take a little bit of control back? So mindful eating, I don't mean sitting cross-legged and arming your Christmas dinner or anything like that. It's basically understanding that this is already at play. All these things are already happening. You're just finding yourself in the midst of a storm that's already raging. That's the advertisement storm that happens. And the first step is to really take time to be present with your food choices, right? As you're eating, brilliant, but I mean this in terms of mindful eating. What are you choosing rather than what are you being steered to do? If you pre-commit to what you'll eat during the holidays, it can really, really change that kind of decision fatigue, specifically if you're feeling stressed out. If you know there'll be a party or a family gathering, decide in advance how you will handle the food and stick to it. There is nothing wrong with saying to yourself, I'm going to take 5 days off in the month. I'm going to take, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, Stephen's Day, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day. Right, I'm going into January there as well. But basically, if you say to yourself, yeah, I'm totally fine with that decision, it allows you to counteract that a little bit for the rest of the month, rather than saying, sure, jeepers, it's December now, 31 days of absolute hedonism, here we come. So it will really, really help to get you back into the control, get you back in the driver's seat. And again, if you've decided, look, I have a family gathering later, they're probably going to push some kind of mince pie on me. There's no problem with that. I'm just going to make sure the rest of my day, the meals I have control of are foods that I'm happy to, sign off on. Personally going, yeah, I'm happy I've had, a good, strong protein start to the day. I'm not on the kind of carb carousel that is going to bring cravings, crashes, which all of these foods, of course, do. If you start your day with a nice protein-based breakfast, protein-based lunch, if there's a little bit more carbohydrates in the latter part of the day, they're not going to affect you just as badly as if you've had them all day long. So limit your exposure to food cues, which is difficult. Now, am I saying stay at home, wear some sunglasses and a scarf wrapped around your head? Not really, unless that's what you like to do during your Christmas holidays. So it's trying to basically counteract the knowledge that TV, shops, radio, good God, radio around Christmas time is just absolutely, it's like a sphere of purgatory. During the holidays, if you try to minimize your exposure to food-related ads, and whether that's avoiding certain, channels, certain supermarkets, we all have to eat, I suppose, but just being aware that they're at play. And a good little trick is that be on the lookout for them. So if you can name them, if you can recognize them and say, that's what's happening here, it lessens the psychological cue of it. So if you can see it and say, no, not falling for this, it's going to really, really help undermine that priming that it is trying to do. So you're much, much less likely to be swayed by these types of conditioning manipulation tactics. So the other thing is support from others and accountability. Now, this can mean with your somebody that shares kind of health goals with you. Having somebody that you can discuss things with really, really helps. If there's somebody in your life that you know, love and trust enough to talk about your health goals, because of course, that's very private and family members always have a 2 cents they love to give into it. And sometimes you just don't really want to have that conversation with family members. But if you pick somebody, and it can be somebody that you have this particular conversation with, right? Somebody that you have access to quite often, and that you can both have conversations around, jeepers, isn't it dreadful how they're trying to push X, Y, and Z and this and that and the other. And the fact that you're talking about it openly, or the fact that you're able to say to somebody, look, I don't want to partake in all of that. Can I just have your support with that? If you then have external support that either is joining you on the quest to right all the wrongs of the advertising world with you, and you can have lots of chats around that, or somebody that just says, look, I'm with you, I can see you're trying really, really hard, and I'm just going to make sure that nothing gets pushed on you, encouragement for when you are having healthy behaviors. That's a really, really massive, massive aid long-term for yourself. So in conclusion, I'll get rid of my little thing there. In conclusion, if you understand how marketing manipulates emotions and decision making, it can really, really help to empower you to make informed decision making with regards going towards healthier choices, even during Christmas. The treat yourself mentality might seem harmless, and I mean, it can be. It just depends how often you're finding yourself treat yourself. But it is rooted in very, very deep psychological tactics that disrupt your health goals. If you become more aware of these, spot them out in the wild, of these marketing strategies, and pre-commit to what it is that you do want to have during the holiday season. I mean, I've said it before here, Ferrero Rocher are just my go-to during Christmas. If I can fit 3 of them in my mouth on Christmas Day, I'm just the happiest lady. If you can pre-commit and choose, these are days I'm going to go slightly off plan, happy days, not going to feel bad about it. Do not give yourself any guilt wave, anything like that, because as we've just outlined, it actually will not serve you. It's going to make things more difficult. So just keep calm, move on, limit your exposure to food cues, whatever that might look like, and build an environment of support with people that you trust in your life. I'll say the thing again, it's easier to trick somebody than have them admit that they were tricked. So do think critically about the messages that you receive over the holiday period, and don't feel that things are going to be totally shunked out of your control altogether. You absolutely can stay in the driver's seat with it. Right, that's my 2 cents with it. Any questions, comments, I always like to receive them. You can just pop them into the comment section. Otherwise, guys, I will chat to you next week. Have a lovely rest of your day and have a lovely rest of your week. I didn't mean that to rhyme, but look, here we are. We'll see you again now. Bye.